Got a few of our phone calls lined up. Let's go right to them. Let's go to Derek in the Midwest. Derek, how you doing tonight?
Not bad, Lee. Yourself?
It could be better, but can't complain too much. What's on your mind?
Yeah, I hear that. Well, I have a couple questions all along the same lines. Let's flesh this out. There's a group of 3 or 4 people, all seemingly of similar ilk. They've appeared on each other's shows. They've done projects together. They promote each other's work. And I would like your take on these people and why, because I don't know if you've ever had any of them on your show. However, given the depth that you go into, as well as people like Reeves, and I don't think he's ever had them on either. But they do seem like, unless there's a specific reason for it, that they very well could be people that you would try to have on, or at least interview. And I've never found anything with you guys all speaking. So the names are Greg Syzmanski, Eric Phelps, Thomas Richards, and then kind of a wild card in that group is Leo Zagami.
Okay, I've heard of a few of these people. You're talking about Eric John Phelps, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, yeah, Eric John Phelps. I've visited his website a few times, but I have not had a chance to look really in-depthly at his work. I know he gets into the Jesuits and the Vatican and all that stuff. He seems really focusing on that. I can't really comment too heavily on the type of stuff he puts out. I've heard of Greg Syzmanski, but I have not looked at his information either. And the other 2 people I'm not familiar with at all. And maybe you can give me some more insight as to what they talk about and what they put out. And Eric John Phelps is the guy I'm most familiar with because he puts all that Vatican stuff. But even him, I really haven't looked at his info all that in-depthly, to be quite honest with you.
Okay, and that's just something that I didn't know if you just hadn't looked into their info much, or if maybe you looked into their info and found something that was something that raised an eyebrow too much for you to want to deal with them, or I didn't really know, so I figured I'd ask. But they do, all of them pretty much. You did hit it. They all get into the Vatican information, and generally the stuff that the first couple levels of the Patriot community always refuses to even touch upon. So I figured that doing similar research, I thought that you'd have at least a better idea of who they were, but that's quite all right. Greg Syzmanski does a lot of information on the Jesuits. He's got a website, arcticbeacon.com. I can send you a link to some of this stuff if you want, if you actually want to look into it, because I think it's stuff that you'd thoroughly enjoy. And if it's not accurate information, then these people also need to be confronted. However, Greg Syzmanski used to have a show on RBN, used to have a show on GCN, and was pulled from both networks, supposedly for getting into Vatican information. There are multiple shows that he's Eric John Phelps on, and I think there's somebody else too. I don't remember the guy's name, but they went in pretty in-depth talking about that kind of stuff. So that you might have some interest there. Thomas Richards has spirituallysmart.com. I don't know if you've been there or not. He's got, it used to be completely different. Now it's some like spirituallysmart.blogspot or whatever.
Okay, I've heard that website. Yeah, I've heard that website. I just didn't, the name just wasn't familiar to me, but I've heard of that site, yeah.
Okay. And that is kind of similar. Him and Greg Syzmanski, I think he's been on Syzmanski's show before. Richards doesn't really have a show or anything. He doesn't really do videos, but he's made a couple of YouTube posts, just on stuff that he felt, was important enough for him to post, I guess. And he does write blogs, and he puts out, real damning pictures of people aligned with, the Catholic Church and these ceremonies and stuff like that. People like George Bush, who claim to be, I forgot, I think Bush claims to be a Protestant of some sort, doesn't he?
No, he said he was born again. Of course, that can mean only.
Did he say he was born again?
Yeah, he said, they asked him, "Are you a Christian, sir?" And he said, "Well, I'm born again." Well, okay, born again in what? I mean, you can use your imagination as to what he was talking about there. But I don't think he meant born-again Christian.
Right, yeah, that's pretty vague. And then Leo Zagami is just a guy who's been, supposedly he's ex-Illuminati or current Illuminati. He's a lot of crazy information in files that you can actually see with supposedly official Illuminati letterheads and all this stuff.
Wait, hold on. This guy claims that he's a former member of the Illuminati, and he's got PDFs.
Yeah, a lot of stuff that just screams disinfo. But then you actually look at the stuff and some of the stuff he talks about, and you're like, okay, well, either you're good disinfo to the extent that you actually have a lot of information that you can check out and find to be accurate, and so who knows? Maybe it is disinfo, maybe it's not, or I don't know if he knows a lot of these people, but I mean, he talks about like the P2 Lodge, and he goes into the stuff that goes on like in New York with their things like the New York Rotary Club, and he talks about George Hoover Balistrieri a lot, and I don't know, he gets into a lot of other information, but I mean, initially you would think, yeah, right, like everything is you're just like, there's no way that this could possibly be real because you'd be shot for, like, I mean, they put one in Kennedy for doing less than seemingly what Leo Zagami is talking about, if his information is real and accurate. But the thing is, you got Zagami, which weirds you out about the whole, Greg Syzmanski, Eric Phelps, Thomas Richards thing, because Syzmanski has had Zagami on the show and supports Zagami as being factual and accurate, has also had Eric Phelps on, and Eric Phelps in Vatican Assassins, I know that book I haven't read all the way through, but I mean, I've looked through some of the footnotes. It is a pretty well-researched book, if nothing else. And as far as Richards, I can tell he seems like he's on the up and up, so that's why I call Zagami the wild card. I just thought maybe you'd have some insight in my head. It's about somebody who's like an up-and-coming activist, and now I'm trying to figure out what to make of her, and I can only think bad things, but I hope I'm wrong. And that's Catherine Bleisch.
It's interesting you mentioned that, because I've started to have some questions about her myself. And the reason why I say this is because it just seems as if, for some reason, whenever you see these people who all of a sudden come out of nowhere and achieve some level of prominence within the patriot truther community, you have to wonder, okay, well, why is this happening? And, of course, we had the event between her and Alex Jones, which, in retrospect, that might have been staged. And not only that, but also she signed this document with all these fellow patriots and truthers that all sorts of weird Masonic language in. I covered this on a show a while back. If you go to the We the People Foundation website, it's somewhere on there. But they actually signed this scroll, and this scroll reaffirms their belief that the Constitution is this great document, all this stuff. But it has all this Masonic language about the all-seeing eye and all this weird stuff. You have to take a look at it, and you'll see what I mean.
Really?
Yeah, and if I remember correctly, she was a signer of that document. And, just
right.
Just weird stuff, man. I don't know what to make of it. I'm not saying that she's some sort of agent or whatever, but there's certainly some very questionable things about some of the stuff that she's been involved with. So, yeah, I have some questions there, absolutely.
Yeah, I agree, and for pretty much the same reasons. I mean, I looked at the Jones thing, and I was like, okay, do they need to, put the patriot, crown on somebody else? And if they do need to eventually, because Jones ain't going to be here forever, who are they going to do it with? And, it was looking like Burmis, and it still kind of does. I mean, he's the obvious choice, but I mean, like, I don't know, it just doesn't, for me, for some reason, that just doesn't work. I don't know why, I just don't feel right about it. And for some reason, I have a feeling the way that they do things, they tear people down and then they replace them. They don't usually make somebody a hero and then give them a successor. They usually tear them down and replace them with somebody who's supposed to be better because they're different. And, if that whole Bleisch thing was staged, then that could very well be a future for her.
It's very possible. Hey, man, nothing would surprise me at this point. Nothing would surprise me. But, hey, unfortunately, we're out of time. Call me back tomorrow. Maybe we can discuss this some more, because that's definitely some interesting stuff that you raised. But anyway, folks, we have to jet. Thanks again for the call, Derek, and we'll see you tomorrow. Take care, everybody.
3 million plus edible food plants that grow on Earth.